Hi guys, welcome to my third part of what is space. I made already two videos, but space is really infinite, and I think it's the best example to explain it. So that's the third part, and let me just go ahead and go on with it. So what is space? That's the thing I was investigating in, and I did already two videos, and that's the third one. And as I said, that space, the word space. See, the interesting thing is the word itself, space, was given that reflects off that which we afterwards called space. So we actually don't know what it is, but what is reflecting up on, we call it space. So it's really interesting how names, names being created, and you need names as a reference. So a lot of what people also have to know is that most of the things like date, time, inches, centimeters, kilogram, weighs, pounds, acceleration, distance, we all use it as a reference, right? And I will go later into it. So back to that, what is space? So I said in the last video, space can be seen as hope. By that I mean you can create an extension to extend an area which you can call it hope, that creates more opportunities or more possibilities. And space can be seen also as a free to move around, like moving around in an area, free to move without any disturbances or without any influences, etc. And space can be seen also as not knowing, something undiscovered. Something undiscovered is space, and we will discover it, that space. Space can also be seen as a momentum. For instance, hold on, please. Let me give me a moment. Let me give me a little bit time, a moment to go into myself. That's what I call it. That's what I meant by it. And space can be also seen as new, something undiscovered, something to observe, something to investigate. Space can be seen also as between, between the board and me, between the camera and myself, between those two papers, between nationalities. Oh, that's something interesting. Okay. Anyway, so that space can be seen as distance. So the thing is, our mind cannot. It seems like that our mind cannot perceive space, because space is actually nothing. It's right here. It's everywhere. It's space, and so space is infinity. It's infinite. And I think that our mind cannot grasp space in a sense. So that's what I think is that if this is a human being in our mind, and this is space, we cannot actually grasp it or hold it or make it out or recognize it or seeing a form or seeing a structure into it. That's why I think that our minds, I think it has been conditioned and trained that we see the space as a curved space. So we know, okay, there's the end. It's like a reference, you know. That's the thing with those reference. I'm gonna draw always something on the board to make an example. So space is this. Now we can move freely, we can go everywhere, and this is space. Now we reduced space, then because we don't know, we cannot grasp it, we see everything as a curved space. Our mind sees everything as a curved space, right? So it means that space that is not invisible, you cannot grasp it, you cannot hold on to it, you don't recognize nothing it. So we make a frame around it, which you see here. That's the curved space. Our mind perceives it as a curved space, and you automatically see that we have a frame. And now we caught that we introduced space into a frame. So we know, okay, till here, that's the borderline, till here, that's the reference point. That space we can operate now. And then that space is still too big and too freely to move and too unidentified. We have to create more privacy, more reference, more structure in that space area. And I want to emphasize privacy, form, and structure into that already framed space. So why we don't make it more frameable into we splitting that space. We can split it by triangles, we can split it by cubes, we can split it in rectangles, we can split it in cones, we can split it in what else can we split it? We can split it in a cylinder, right? We can split it in rooms. So what happens here is what happens here visual is we zooming in, because space is so big, the mind cannot grasp it. It's everything is invisible. There's no reference, there's no structure, there's no form, there's no frame, and we feel like we get lost into it. That's why we've been conditioned and trained to think that the space is like a curved space. That's why I did in the beginning those 4 curved things. And if you connect those 4 curved, we have already that the space is now caught in that frame. And then we have a picture. Then we see visual, okay, this is space. Now I know it has 4 corners, it has lines, etc. And it's still too big, so I want to make it more privacy. I want to have more structure, and I want to have more I want to have it more visible because it's still too big, that frame. So we zoom it more in, and we create more forms in form of a triangle, in form of a cube, in form of a rectangle, a cone, a cylinder, or we split it in 3 rooms, or in 5 rooms, or in 4 rooms. So as more we zoom in, the smaller space it will be, right? Then let's say we have here a 2 or 3 or 5 bedroom, 6 bedroom, whatever, and then in those 3 bedroom are 2 people or 3 people, etc. So everything is zoomed in and gets smaller and smaller, the space, right? So by zooming in, the form becomes then a triangle or a square or a cube or a rectangle or a cylinder. Or rooms, we separate the space in rooms, and then we set in that rooms people 2 and 3. So space becomes privacy. And it shouldn't be that way, because I think that's the wrong way. We should be more the other way around. Space is for everyone. But we have reduced it so down throughout the history that the only space you really have is in your mind. And it's invisible. So that is space. So it has, we by zooming in, we created a privacy. Space becomes a privacy. But space should be for everyone. But we see it as we take it as privacy, and so our space gets more and more zoomed in, smaller and smaller, and you have to pay for space, which is absurd actually. Why you should pay for space when space is for everyone? So these are forms, right? So that's what we can identify, and these are because space is this, and we can create references, we can create forms as I just drew before: a triangle, a square, and so on, a cone, a circle. So, but by doing these forms, we have caught space into it. So the space, which was this before, is no more free. It's caught up in a circle. And that circle is defined by a law or by a rule or by a terms, a rule or a form. Same thing with triangles or a square or rectangle or a cone. So now we have focal or put the space centric into it as those figures and these forms. Now what we have created also is that because everything was one, everything was all, space was invisible, non-visible, we didn't recognize anything, it hasn't any structure, any forms, any reference. But by reducing it down to space, we have identified forms like a rectangle, a triangle, a circle, a cone, and each form has its own particular means part of all, particular formula, law, etc. by each object. Now, because we did this, we have created space between these objects, as you see right here, right? So that's another kind of space. So by creating those forms, between those forms we have created now a space, free space, which tangles around between the captured space. And the captured space is the circle, the sphere, the cone, the triangle, a rectangle, or a cube. So now our mind, and it's the same thing with the mind, because the mind in its origin status is infinite, infinite. It's really endless, like the space you see at night. It's endless. And what we look is in our mind is the same thing what NASA or the science do in the upper sky. That's why a lot of people said back in the days in the 1700s that physicists and scientists back in the days said that our solar system in the upper atmosphere, in the sky, in the space, is actually like our mind, our thought. So what they look is to understand in this infinite space, to understand how things work, they have to observe, they have to watch carefully, they have to experiment, they have to find forms, they have to find reference, they have to find frequencies or signals, and according to these things you can build up then something. It's the same thing with, say it like this. In the world we live nowadays on the planet Earth, we are full of forms, references, billions of references, theories, formulas, laws, terms, etc. on our planet Earth. So our whole space is actually completely gone, because we transformed space into privacy, and we pay for that space. Isn't it absurd? Now, NASA and the scientists are investigating the space. Now just think for it a little bit. So in that space, they have to try to find out how things works in the space. Same thing with our mind. So what they do is they observe the motion, the rotation, they observe the colors, they observe the distance, the height and stuff like that. And what is also very important, what you guys have to remember, as long you don't work or operate on planet Earth, which means as soon you are leaving the planet Earth, no law whatsoever exists no more, because you're not operating on planet Earth. That means whatever they discovered, whatever they do, whatever they create on Mars, on Jupiter, whatnot, and all the other planets, they can do whatever they want because they are free to operate, because there's no law. There's no law on Jupiter. There's no law on Mars. So they can do whatever they want to on that planet, right? But if you operate on the planet Earth, they are all captured and hidden and captured and disturbed and occupied with all kinds of terms, laws, the law of mankind, the law of law of vehicles, the law of all these lawyers' law what we have. So please have that in mind. It just occurred in my head. As soon you leave the planet Earth, there is no rule, there is no law whatsoever what they do out there in the space. So they can actually do whatever they want to in that space, because they are not against any law. Because the law, as we know, the law of all the judge, and etc., exists only, it's bound on the planet Earth. What they do on Mars, on Jupiter, they can do there whatever they want to, because there is no law existing. So have that always in the back of the mind. It's really interesting. So back to that thing. So by reducing the invisible space, we try to create references, forms, and by doing that, we zoom more and more in, in particular from all, we go down in partial particulars, forms like a square, like a sphere and a cone and a triangle, and a form and a cone and a sphere and a triangle are matters, are informations, like it has mathematical functions, like pi and stuff like that, or you know, all these formulas and those equations for those forms. So it's a law, it's a formula in itself in that space. Now, when you operate in this area, right, in this rectangle, you are automatically in that space. So you can never see that space because you are caught up in this space. Or when you operate in the field of this form, you caught up in this form. Or when you operate and function this form, you are caught up in this form. And the same thing over here, right? So I think it's really important to understand what space means, how our mind perceives space, how we are conditioned and trained to perceive space, and how we create out of nothing something. Because everything started from an idea, from an idea, and to move along that process of that idea, that it becomes a concept, a theory, you have to give a step-by-step milestone on that, which means that invisible space is nothing, so we give it a name, we give it space. So now, instead of saying nothing, I can use always the word space. And now we can say space is this. You know what I'm saying? And then okay, now the space has no forms. Or I call it a form. What is a form? It's a triangle, it's a sphere, it's a so words are describing things. Right? So that's why it's interesting why it says that in the beginning it was the Word. But the thing is, if you see something absolutely new, you never heard about it, and you never read about it, nobody told you about it, and you discover from yourself without knowing any terms of something, you create your own stuff out of it, your own concept. You give it a name, you give it your own structure, you give it their own reference, and so you create those things, right? So that's very important, what space actually means, and how space is so reduced down nowadays that 2, 3, 4, 5 people living in 3 rooms, for example. So we made space into a privacy section, and we pay for it, which is really, I don't know, for me it's insane, because space should be for everyone. And then we have to think about why do we create space in an act of a privacy, you know? All right, guys, I think I have to make a 4th video because so infinite though. All right, thank you for watching. See you next time.